Okay. Um, Greetings, everyone. I guess depending on where you are in the world, so I'm not gonna bother with trying to make this time specific. For those who are following live and for those who are watching a recording, it's a pleasure for me to host this special session. My name is Divisi Araba. I'm the managing director of Academia 2063. Academia 2063 is a research institution and think tank that provides the science that we need for the Africa we want. And today we're going to discuss an area that is uh, of importance to us as an organization, but more importantly, that is critical and potentially catalytic for agriculture transformation in Africa. And that's the technology of agrivoltaics. Um, African countries face an increasingly complex convergence of food insecurity, energy access constraints, and of course, climate shocks and stresses. We have rising temperatures, soil degradation, rainfall variability, and all these other issues reducing or compromising agriculture productivity. While nearly half of the continent's population still lacks reliable energy and electricity, these pressures are slowing development progress and weakening the resilience of countries at the national level down to rural and local levels. By optimizing land use while delivering both energy and agricultural benefits, agrivoltaics potentially can contribute to climate adaptation, food systems transformation, and rural economic development. Now, realizing this opportunity, the Consortium for Sustainable Agrivoltaics, C4SA, and its partners are preparing to launch the Agrivoltaics for Africa Platform Initiative. This initiative aims to catalyze research, policy development, and investment in agrivoltaic markets across Africa. The initiative envisions a coordinated international effort to support pilot projects, enabling policies, technical capacity building, and early stage financing mechanisms. A key element under discussion is the potential establishment of an agrivoltaics for Africa facility to support project preparation, technical assistance, and catalytic investments in early deployments. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Chris Hegaden, the President, Consortium for Sustainable Agrivoltaics, to provide framing remarks. Chris, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Davisi. It's great to be here. Let me thank your team, by the way, Lei and her colleagues who have put this together. And I'm really super excited to be here with you, with Lisa, Paul, Lade. It's an hour. It'll pass quickly, and there's so much to say. The concept of agrivoltaics has been around for some time. It's not technically complex, but what is complex is bringing together the food community, the energy community, the environment and water communities, working toward the same strategic objectives, which is sustainable development to bring food, energy, and water security to communities where it's needed. Now, I've been doing food security work for many years, decades, as a former diplomat. I teach about food politics here in Paris, and I founded the Consortium for Sustainable Agrivoltaics because I thought this would be a really impactful and powerful approach to addressing the needs, particularly in the world's developing countries where food security is so high, where climate change is making everyone's lives more complex and difficult, where environmental sustainability is critical. Agrivoltaics can be, if it's done right, and if it's done with the support of governments who put in place the right policies, if it's done with the support of the financial community. There's plenty of money out there looking for good projects, and this is certainly a sector that can use more funding. But it also provides farmers with a dual income stream while protecting the environment, while conserving soils and waters. They can be making income off of renewable energy, solar energy, while putting the solar panels off the ground, creating micro climates for plants, for animals, for livestock, for fish ponds, and help develop these value chains around food production that will improve their livelihoods, will improve the food security of their communities, offer new jobs, new income streams. There's just a lot of benefits to agrivoltaics. Now, the consortium has developed the idea of a African agrivoltaics platform, and this is work that we've been doing for 2 years now. We worked to get language into the G7's Pescara Declaration from October in 2024. The Italian government put it into the text at our request. The G7 approved it, and we are hoping the G7 and other development partners come in to support this approach. We just had Togo, the country of Togo, write to us formally last night to say they will be the first country to join the platform when it launches, when it opens for membership on the 10th of April, and we'll talk about that. We're super excited. We have a great group of people coming to Paris where we will launch. But right now, we're just going to get into the issues around agrivoltaics, the benefits, and the great partners that are here with us today. So back to you, Debisi.
Well, many thanks, Chris. Now, so we create the more interactive panel discussion. So as a prelude to the panel discussion, I want to introduce our eminent speakers who will provide introductory remarks, short, brief introductory remarks, and then we go into a moderated conversation. First, we have Lisa Krubeel, the director of the UN Joint SDG Fund. And next, after Lisa, we will have Lade Araba, Blended Finance Executive, and then Paul Horrocks, Head of Unit at the OECD. So Lisa, Lade, and Paul, you have the floor in that order. Please provide your brief remarks, and then we get into the meat of the matter. Over
Excellent.
to you,
Well, thanks
Lisa.
so much. Delighted to be here and delighted to kick off the panel. I'm sitting within the United Nations. I represent a member state idea to have a startup or a financing mechanism that could support the UN development system that would help blend finance between public and private sector, specifically in least developed countries and small island developing states. It's called the Joint SDG Fund. I'll put some of our references into the chat, but of course you can find us online. I think we're excited to be here because of all of our commitments to least developed countries, naturally to the continent of Africa, and that's sort of an understatement for the UN development system at large. And what I'm meant to do is bring the small cap. We're barely capitalized to 500 million, so we're quite small in the scheme of funding streams. But what we're meant to be is catalytic. And in just 5 years, we've earned a reputation because we can now, for every dollar invested, we can prove that we've leveraged that to 20. And it's very difficult to get a return of 20 to 1 in most markets, but in the markets we work in, even more so. And we do that through the quality technical assistance that the UN development system provides, through the leadership and steadfast commitment to the SDGs that governments provide, and then to the generosity of the member states that keep our lights on, right? So we have about 18 member states that have replenished us repeatedly since we opened doors in 2019. And now we're hoping to align all of the work that we're already doing around climate change, around food systems, around poverty reduction, potentially with agrivoltaics, which of course are not unique to the continent, but can always be embellished, strengthened, and broadened. So our goal in any alignment is to ensure that the role of the UN is maximized, it's efficient, it's effective, and then how do we make it easier for the deeper pockets of the DFIs, of the asset managers, of the VC firms prevalent on the continent to join us. And that's where our de-risking comes in. So in some of our most successful endeavors, solar parks in Zimbabwe, renewables in Latin America, where we've attracted IFC, Santander, HBC, others, it's because of that de-risking, where we're known to put in 5 to 10% of the ticket size to enable the project to be structured and then go forward. It's given the UN a seat at the table, at the negotiating table next to government. It's enabled us to align the policy work that we do. It's bread and butter for what the UN agencies provide across all of the development system agencies, funds, and programs. And then to really see if we can help attract, as I said, other funding and other funding streams. So really excited to be here, really excited to engage with the panel. I'm thrilled because Paul's here. The OECD awarded the Joint SDG Fund due to our transparency in our impact investing. That was an award that we received several years ago from OECD. We're very, very proud of that because you can track every dollar of grant funding that comes into the fund all the way down to the country teams that are working to make the change for the SDGs. So thank you so much, Chris and organizers, everyone, Dr. Araba, for this opportunity. And I'm here to engage and be helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Lade and then Paul.
Thank you, DBC. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you again to the organizers for the invitation. I have worked in blended finance across DFIs, public sector agencies, advising private investors over the last couple of decades, and have also been very involved in financing large-scale power projects. And more recently was providing a form of blended finance within the food and agriculture sector, where we leveraged partial credit guarantees to effectively increase access to agro inputs for smallholder farmers as the ultimate beneficiary. What was interesting about that was that typically farmers are not able to access credit. I think everybody understands that situation, and it was deemed too risky to extend credit directly to the farmers. So a way to de-risk the value chain and the supply chain for agro inputs was to then provide partial credit guarantees to large multinationals and also national companies producing fertilizers and other agro inputs, and allowing them to sell on credit to agro dealers and ultimately pass on those benefits to the farmers. And this created volume discounts, which effectively also helped to reduce the cost that the ultimate end user, the farmers, would be paying for the product. This was complemented with technical assistance, where they were trained in good agronomic practices. They also had the benefit of soil testing, because soil health is a major challenge across the region. And in as much as we want to promote access to agro inputs, if you have soils that are depleted of nutrients, and that does ultimately have a negative impact on productivity. So it's very interesting that, combining both the energy with the work that I've done with financing both small and large scale on-grid and off-grid power projects, including solar, that we are speaking about agrivoltaics. I sit on the board of ARC Limited, which is a $100 million parametric insurance company that effectively supports African countries in disaster risk management and provides customized insurance products that cover tropical cyclones, floods, pests and diseases, outbreaks, and a variety of other perils. And what we're finding is that we're increasingly having to file, or countries are filing claims, because again, we are seeing more erratic and more severe climate shocks that are impacting the countries. So this is a really great time for us to be exploring agrivoltaics and how we can leverage this known method and technology to strengthen resilience in Africa, but also to consider food security, which continues to be a challenge in many countries, and at the same time recognizing that we still have 600 million people who don't have access to energy, clean energy, but energy in general. So I'm very excited to be able to contribute to the conversation and to the thoughts around structuring this platform, just bearing in mind the various blended finance structures that could be utilized. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Lade. Paul, you have the floor.
Thank you, Debishi, and thanks again for the invitation to participate in this. Thanks to Chris for bringing me in. Just to say, I'm Paul Horrocks. I lead the Private Finance Sustainable Development team here in the Development Cooperation Directorate of the OECD. So what do I do? Essentially, we gather data around mobilization. So we look at the evidence base and then inform our members. We work upstream into the donors, pushing them to mobilize more, but to be more transparent about it as well. And that's why we like the SDG fund that Lisa's running, because I think that's a great example of mobilization and transparency and impact. So it's great to see the fund online with us, and some great collaboration. So and it's good to see all these people online and with such a rich sort of overview of participants. So I hope we have some good discussions. So we're trying to move the DFIs to become more coordinated, cooperative, standardizing products and transparent. We inform the Development Assistance Committee, which is the committee that makes the decisions around ODA, but also increasingly around mobilization. And so we've done lots of work around evidence, gathering the evidence, building the knowledge base around blended finance and what's working, what's not, where there's still blockages. And through that, we've influenced and had recommendations put in by the G7, the G20. And so that's been our blended finance principles, the blended finance guidance, which has just been updated, which you can use to ensure that you're essentially blending for development and that you're crowding in, not crowding out the private sector, that you're looking at ensuring that you're working with developing partners. So that means that you try and work in local currency, that you build partnerships with the local partners for effective engagement, and that you're transparent and have an evidence base around this. So those are essentially the five principles. And I think for the agrivoltaic sectors, those definitely apply. And then we've been doing lots of work downstream, which I think this is an exciting topic because it combines agriculture, which is an important part of the African economy and provides lots of jobs, alongside a growing area, and the need for adaptation, climate resilience, and having the technology to be able to combine the future of farming with the future of addressing climate change. So this is we look at these new sectors, and we've done work on blended finance in Africa around agriculture. We've also looked at the water sector. So this is great to be on this call, and I look forward to learning a lot on how this new sector can grow and contribute to the future of Africa. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, I think from these initial remarks from our panelists, you realize we're in for a highly informative but educative session. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping here. We have two options to engage and interact for the general participants. The first is the chat function. Please introduce yourselves and interact with fellow attendees. And also, if you have comments on what's being discussed, please feel free to use the chat function. But if you have questions specifically for the panelists, I would invite you to use the Q&A button. And to find that, if depending on how you've logged into to Zoom, you can click on More, and you will find the Q&A button there, and then you type your question. So please use the Q&A function for questions specifically for the panelists, and then the chat for general comments. Now, Chris, I know you provided framing remarks. We have quite a large number of people from representing various sectors: private sector, academia, research institutions, development partners, etc., financing institutions on this webinar today. Can you provide us just a framing of agrivoltaics, like why this nexus of food, energy, and water, and why does this approach, or why do you feel this approach holds so much promise? Over to you.
Yeah, thanks to BC. Agrivoltaics has been around for a while. The experts tell me that this started, in fact, in Japan in the 1980s, that it was motivated in part because of high real estate prices, that there was no more space to chop down forests to put up, to grow more food, and that is a problem that we are facing around the world. Deforestation, damage to our environments, to our habitats for animals, and so they started putting the panels off the ground, and that sounds rather simple. There is a lot of context in each place where this is done, but if you get the panels off the ground, and whether it's 3 meters, 4 meters, I mean, it depends on what you're growing underneath, but many plants, many crops are shade tolerant. They do not need 100% sunlight, and particularly in very hot, warm, dry climates. Too much sun will burn the plants and prevent them from growing, shorten their crop cycle life, and reduce the productive life of the plant, as well as dry out the soil. So getting the panels off the ground creates microclimates where plants do better. And the evidence, not only in Europe, Asia, North America, but in Africa, there's the UM6Pay. I see our friend Ngoni is online. They have research going on right now in Morocco that shows production is doing quite well under these agrivoltaic panels. Our friends at Sintef and Sheffield University have done research in Tanzania and Kenya showing tremendous volume increases as well as savings. So you're not using diesel fuel to pump water. In fact, you can collect rainwater off of the panels. You can store it for the cycle of the crop you're growing. But it's not just plants. You can actually raise chickens, sheep, cows. They do very well. Not only are they benefiting from the shade, but the value and the quality of the eggs, of the meat, of the milk from those from the livestock is much higher. And so there are many benefits. As I said, it also protects biodiversity. It conserves water in the soil, and it offers a dual income stream. So a farmer, she can start collecting income from her solar energy as well as the food that she is producing underneath those panels. So it's we have brought together, and we intend to include them in the platform, a number of the world's best experts on agrivoltaics, and the research that includes IEA, the International Energy Agency. It includes Fraunhofer University, Sintef in Norway, UM6Pay in Morocco, and others. But the evidence is overwhelming. So there's no question agrivoltaics can bring value. The tough part is getting the energy ministry and the agriculture ministry and the environment water ministers talking together and making sure that the regulatory frameworks are aligned, that the policy frameworks are consistent, that they're working together, not working against each other. And that's what the platform is meant to do. And I'll discuss that in a little while, but the idea is to get governments to recognize that this is an interministerial approach, a nexus approach, as you referenced, and that the focus is on resilience. As Lade said, really how to not only bring energy access to Africa, where 600 million people are without energy to start with, but also to start using green, clean solar energy to improve the productivity of farms, water, irrigation, cold storage, which you can start using to help prevent some of the food loss that is so rife across Africa. So these are some of the benefits we will show more evidence on April 10 when we have our workshop in OECD. The work that Paul and his colleagues are doing around the finance bit and the work that Lisa and her team are doing to catalyze investment. As I said, there's plenty of money out there looking for good projects, and structured correctly, agrivoltaics, are fantastic on so many levels. Back to you.
Thanks, Chris. Paul, following on, Chris just said, there's a lot of money out there. Now, how true is that, Paul? And more importantly, how is it possible to utilize blended financial structures to scale agrivoltaics, or at least to improve the investment viability or the potential of agrivoltaics across the continent? What are the lessons that you are seeing, or where's the potential here?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen, and I was looking at the data before coming on. I mean, in Africa in 2024, the agricultural sector through blended finance mobilized 300 million. So that's fisheries, forest, but agriculture as well. USD. Energy also mobilized 300 million. So we're still, I mean, not at the volumes that we would like in terms of mobilization, but I mean, for agrivoltaics to become more prominent, there is money. This agenda of mobilizing is growing, and there's a recognition that that's the ways that DFIs, MDBs, and others are moving. So they are increasing their capacity to do more transactions. And I think there's lots of entrepreneurs in Africa that recognize this as an important sector and want to work with both local capital in local currency, but also offshore funds, and attract investment into Africa. And blended finance can be that point that mobilizes through a first loss equity into a small startup in agrivoltaics, or a more significant opportunity where you might use a concessional loan, or in an even bigger project where you might start thinking about green, social, sustainable bonds, if it was a significant size. So it depends on the spectrum, and there is a lot of capital that's looking for projects that hit the agrivoltaics KPI. So investment in emerging markets, agriculture is an important sector, adaptation, and technology. So it's got a certain attraction to it that I think is important. The issues may be that they're sort of moving between the agricultural sector, or the funds that are focusing on agriculture, and the energy funds or climate adaptation funds that are missing this. So somehow you need to develop an asset class of agrivoltaics, get it into those funds and facilities, those DFIs that are setting up programs and portfolios, and have a focus on agrivoltaics.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Now, Lade, solar projects are picking up across the continent, growing faster than any other region in terms of overall energy investment mixes. In your opinion, will markets respond to adding agriculture on top of these solar deals as you see them, given the complexity, the need to develop markets, the offtake for both energy and food? How do you see this working? And connected to what Paul just said on blended finance.
That's a great question, Davey C. And I want to sort of preface my sorry. My apology. Sorry for the distraction. The joys of working from home. So as I was saying, I wanted to preface my intervention by saying that when we think about blended finance, before I come directly to the question, I think it's very important for us to always consider how to create commercially viable transactions that are well structured, that appeal to a variety of investors. So you have different, investor types along the capital continuum. They have different.
Okay, Lade, I think we have some internet issues or connection issues with Lade. Maybe while she reconnects, Lisa, can I? Yeah. So Lade, if you could just hold that thought, let me bring Lisa on while you reconnect, and then I'll come back to you. Lisa, um, this discussion around blended finance, or at least financing. So Chris has given us the technological imperative. So there's the technology. It's been around for decades. Paul and I suppose Lade was just talking about how we could structure financial mechanisms to bring these to market in a competitive framework. How are you seeing it from your perspective as the SDG fund? Oh, by the way, maybe as an aside, will the fund run beyond 2030? What's the plan for the SDG fund? And how are you seeing your role as financial or catalytic sort of financial enablers in this? And introducing this on the continent, is this more viable at the sort of smallholder level? Is it more at the large scale commercial level, somewhere in between? And in your discussions with financial institutions, what are you seeing in terms of the viability of providing conduits, pipelines for financing agrivoltaics across the continent?
Thank you for that. I think the ongoing challenge of efficiency and effectiveness for multilateral institutions like the UN is a prominent starting point in all the conversations we have with potential partners. And that includes the DFIs and many of the asset managers who are looking for workarounds to expedite the work they can do, the deals they can find, the pipelines they can develop. And so I think point of entry for us is that we do have this cadre of technical experts, both housed in headquarters of UN agencies, funds, and programs, like an FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, like a UNEP, UN Environmental Program. And then we have those country teams that know the country very, very well, are working inside the ministries with governments day in, day out. So I do think I'm seeing a increased demand for how we can get to the deals, because especially for those that are managing much larger portfolios than I do, finding that deal flow can be very expensive and very slow. So I don't see that as the problem. I do see, the risk appetite not necessarily changing that much. With the loss of USAID and all of the expertise that USAID brought to the space, especially on the continent, I am seeing a slightly more open environment for entities like ours, the Joint SDG Fund, to be looked at, because we do offer first loss, and we do seek to really unlock the policy bottleneck for an investment. So in that regard, I'm hopeful. We have over 140 live joint programs at the moment. Some of them are very much focused on the smallholder and their ability to be connected to the grid, and through digital investments enable them to have a greater financial inclusion. So I do run the gamut of those that are agriculturally connected, but maybe through more of a social protection lens, maybe more of a poverty reduction lens. I think with the agrivoltaics, we would be looking to be a part of a capital stack that would attract a DFI, that would attract a member state, and would really give us a broader chance to build this out at scale as a system. I think the allergy to projects is growing, and the impatience for impact is also accelerating, because there won't be as much ODA as there ever was before, and we're going to have to be looking for new ways of doing business. So I think the muscles that the Joint Fund has been trying to help the UN development system build since we started in 2019 make us a reasonable choice right now, especially in environments where the players may be shrinking because of the cuts on the wider development system. So maybe I'll pause there and see if Lottie's back online. Thank you.
Wonderful. No, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. And I trust that we will come back to you. So Lottie, glad to have you back. You may continue.
Thank you, WC, and I hope you can hear me clearly now.
Yes, we can.
So to your question, I was going to preface my response by just reemphasizing the importance of creating structures that are commercially viable, but that also appeal to the diverse risk return profiles of the different types of investors. If you think about the capital continuum, each investor is driven by a unique mandate that may be more commercial or maybe more impact focused. So you've got to work within those confines to create attractive transactions that meet their needs, depending on the type of investor that they are. So having said that, I do think the markets will respond, but you've got to present this new asset class as with agriculture being a value enhancer, not an add-on or a complication. Investors are, prefer certainty and simplicity. When structures start to get overly complicated and complex, it just screams risk, and it effectively becomes quite unattractive. And always remember that they already have options out there. So you've got to frame it as agriculture being a risk mitigant, not an add-on, especially because food and agriculture is considered the more risky of the two sectors. The second thing that I would suggest is, start with success stories, the low-hanging fruit, which is an overutilized cliche, but look at crops and value chains where the agronomic case has already been proven and that is known. And then it's easier to then introduce the added options brought on by, having solar powered projects, if you will, being included in farms. The third thing is, I think it's also important that you separate the structures from the offtake components, but coordinate them at the asset level. What I mean by that is, with solar power, you typically will have an off-taker that needs to be creditworthy. You have a bankable power purchase agreement. Don't change that. With agriculture, you'll also have, an off-taker who might be an aggregator, a cooperative that's buying from the farmers, or, some other type of market player. So again, maintain that structure and don't try to create, a new structure that combines both. So you're still dealing with one asset class, but then there's two trajectories, if you will, that address, the two different sectors. So just try to maintain the simplicity and not create something that's overly complex. The fourth thing is, I think it's also important to develop standardized performance benchmarks. So in Africa, the solar industry has scaled quite considerably because we understand the standardized metrics. So we understand the levelized cost of energy, we understand capacity factors, we understand panel degradation curves, and so on. With agrivoltaics, you need to develop similar benchmarks. So yield ratios under panels versus open field, water use efficiency gains, land equivalent ratios, and things of that nature. So again, consistency and clarity in performance benchmarks just makes it a lot easier for investors and capital allocators more broadly to be interested and to want to cut checks to these types of transactions. I also think it's important to recognize the unique requirements of both debt providers as well as equity investors. So debt providers will probably find agrivoltaics increasingly attractive as you utilize standardized benchmarks, as I've noted, because you are creating diversified cash flows from both energy and agriculture, and that strengthens, your debt service coverage ratios beyond just having, a power solar project, for instance. Equity investors, on the other hand, would recognize things like land use efficiency and also, the community involvement, which reduce the political and regulatory risks that have historically, really hindered energy projects in Africa. And remember, the equity investor is taking on significant risk, expecting, a very attractive risk-adjusted return at a later date. So, they're patient, but they've got a lot of skin in the game. So to kind of, wrap this up, I think that, yes, this is an interesting asset class. Yes, there is potential and opportunity to add on agriculture, but it has to be value adding, enhancing, and it cannot be we're tagging this on. It's risky, and it's going to create a complicated structure that will put off other types of investors.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lottie. So, Chris, coming back to you, you've got your work cut out here in your consortium, because ultimately it's about entrepreneurs taking the risk to adopt this technology and adopt it at scale. So yes, you can have the regulatory frameworks in place, you can have even the financial incentives, but until the entrepreneurs see this as something viable to take a risk in adopting and putting skin in the game, it sits on the shelf. Now, where are the incentives going to come from? Is it more push type incentives or pull type incentives? Are how are you thinking through the work of the consortium? I know you're going to say a bit more about the partners that you're working with. The launch of the event on the 10th of April. What's the kind of makeup of this partnership, and who are you expecting? The archetypes of the partners that you're expecting in the room, and what would success look like, at least in the initial stages? What do the green shoots of success look like for this? Over to you.
Thanks, Tabisi. And you're absolutely right. It is complex, and our work is cut out for us. We see the platform as being a vehicle to bring people together that is the research and evidence side of the house. So these are the organizations that have been doing research on agri-PV for decades, including Fraunhofer ISE in Germany. Our first MOU was with them because of their stellar reputation. We've just been engaging with Jordan McNick, who's on the call. Glad to see him and his colleague Cynthia, who also brings a huge network and depth of expertise around agri-PV. Jordan co-leads something called the PVPS, that's the International Energy Agency's group that focuses on renewables and agri-PV. We've been talking about how we can bring together experts into this platform to better inform both governments and partners, farmers and business people, investors. So again, we'll explain what the platform is in more detail on April 10th, but it is meant to bring governments in with commitments that they are going to take the necessary steps to incubate a domestic market and a national policy approach. And then we would expect to see both a mix of DFIs, development finance institutions, like the SDG fund, that are ready to put concessional finance on the table because they see the benefits long term. But we understand, a pilot project, a small project is not going to be transformational. We are of the opinion that if the conditions are in place, if the government policy and regulations have been clearly communicated and agreed through domestic political processes in African countries, that the private sector getting private finance in will be the game changer. Because that's, I saw some questions about the ticket size of projects. The energy companies come in, and they're looking at, I was up in Amsterdam yesterday at the Future of Energy conference talking to a huge group of development finance experts, and the ticket sizes for them to invest is usually $15 million, $20 million. We're talking about, utility scale energy projects that may or may not then have an agriculture component. Our view is that these projects should be considered at the same time, as Lade was describing. While perhaps separate, they should be considered together. So you're not using land with ground-mounted solar panels without considering either the ecological impact or the agricultural potential. Yes, simplify, and yes, make it clear that agriculture is a value addition, that it is a game changer. Now, I went to Mauritania in January. In fact, one of our partners who I met there, Kadio Niang, with her solar company, Ecobat, has joined us today. People are ready to invest. We have 2 landowners who want to do agri-PV projects on their land. They see the benefit. But if you put, let's say, a 10 megawatt solar facility on a farmer's piece of land, it has to be close to the grid. And there has to be an off-taker, as Lottie described. And what does not exist in Africa, with few exceptions, is cold chain development. So you have refrigerators for the food that comes in, so you can store it for a week, a month, or longer. So the farmers actually have some flexibility about when they sell and at what price they sell. That's the kind of thing that I see developing side by side with agrivoltaics to grow the value proposition. It could also be you're using some of that electricity for drying, threshing, packaging, those productive uses, solar irrigation, or you could be charging batteries to have tuk-tuks driving, food products, but from one village to the next. But it has to be clear that the grid is functional, that there's a clear tarification for the grid, that the rules of the game are clear, they're clearly communicated, they're defensible if an investor comes in, that those rules aren't going to change a year from now. So this is the kind of thing where it's a mixed top-down policy with governments, bottom-up with farmers, bankers, and businesses.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chris. So, I'm starting to get a clearer picture of how you intend to define what success will look like here. I see just a bit of housekeeping. I mentioned at the start, for those who didn't join us at the start, could you use the chat function for general comments and thoughts, and then utilize the Q&A function if you have questions specifically for our panelists. Lisa, Chris has walked us through how he sees success for the consortium. In terms of how the joint fund has worked, could you give us examples of how the successes you've recorded, and then potentially what we could glean from that, as we think through scaling agrivoltaics in Africa? Over
Sure.
to you.
So in Zimbabwe, which is one of our live transactions now with a bank out of South Africa called Old Mutual, we the government identified the limitation of access to power in rural areas outside of the capital, and the lack of investment, private sector investment, to enable, some of those small and medium solar installers and others to really grow. And so after a review of existing mechanisms under Zimbabwean legislation, we crafted a way forward through a investment fund. It's called the Renewable Energy Investment Fund, where the joint SDG fund would bring the first 8 million USD of de-risking capital to a coalition of partners, including Old Mutual, with the first step being Old Mutual matching us dollar for dollar. So our 8 million immediately became 16, and the UN agencies were building up the capacity of the small and medium enterprises to install, to craft a business plan, to document the skills, the costs, the budgets for a potential expansion of a solar, megawatt expansion. while Old Mutual was applying day-to-day banking principles for its investment committee in reviewing the eligibility for those Zimbabwean entities to be financed through this project. Happy to report that the megawatts are expanding, and we now have a few hospitals that are back on grid thanks to the installations. And because of the momentum, the prospectus that Old Mutual is sharing with its clients is poised to grow, both from domestic investments via pension funds and also from global partners. So we happen to have a Spanish solar company from Ibiza that's currently being reviewed, for example. Now, what's exciting, colleagues, about this example, I mentioned earlier that, the policy work of the UN has been something that for decades we've been trying to do, right? Looking for those leapfrog opportunities to really align with what private sector needs on the ground. In the case of Zimbabwe, because of the strength of their pension funds and because of the way that they're legislated, if you add renewable energy, solar panels, solar farms into a prescribed asset class within the legislation, then the national pension funds of the civil servants, of the teachers, et cetera, will qualify to invest right into that very same investment. So because we're so close, we, the UN, in engaging with the Ministry of Finance, with the Ministry of Planning, with the Ministry of Agriculture, that systems approach can actually become a virtuous circle towards more and more megawatts being installed. And that's the space I think that also with agrivoltaics we could explore, right? It is the intersection of energy and ag. It is the intersection of blended finance. And, I've been happy to introduce Chris and colleagues to the resident coordinators who lead the UN country teams across the world, including in Togo, where we now have government support. And that's for all of the behind the scenes work of the UN resident coordinator. The agency's already working in that space of engaging and pushing that along. So how do we all acknowledge we have a role? How do we help each other find the right fit, the right relationship, the right partnership? We don't work enough with the DFIs, quite frankly. We need to. We need to work with them more. How do we get there? I think many on this call have ideas for that, and I hope that this great meeting is the beginning of the meeting that we'll have in Paris in April, and others that can really take us to success. I'm going to put a link in for some of the other investments. There's another one on seaweed in Zanzibar, trying to change the dynamic of it being a seaweed producing country rather than a country that can help process it, right? So from producing to processing, and how can we make sure that some of that value chain stays in the country? That's another exciting one where we are really trying to crowd in investors to look at possibilities in Zanzibar, in Tanzania, before it's shipped off maybe to Asia and other global markets. But I'll make sure that I put those in the chat and happy to take more questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lisa. I told you, ladies and gentlemen, that an hour is going to blow by really quickly. We are in the home straight now. Lisa, you've just blown this, wide 6 minutes to the end of the webinar, thinking about the productivity stack. How do we think, at the farm level, how you maximize productivity? Including agrivoltaics into your technology mix, how you improve the viability of financing mechanisms. We would like, I mean, this is definitely, Chris, I assure you, this is not the final conversation on this. We need to have entrepreneurs on here. I know Paulino Diaz is logged in. I'm not sure if he's actively following this conversation. He's in Cabo Verde, and Paulino is looking to develop an agrivoltaics project as an entrepreneur, looking to bring down the cost of water. And he's actively engaging with various investors and partners on how the technologies he will adopt or adapt to ensure that his entire investment is viable and commercially competitive. The other question is, of course, how do you domesticate the technology? So it's not just about accessing the technology. How do you domesticate the know-how? It's one thing to say you can, you pick these things off the shelves, but thinking about how countries then become more competitive higher up the value chain is a deeper question. Maybe we're going a few layers in. Hopefully, we get to discuss these on the 10th of April. Now. Lisa talked about doing more with DFIs. We need to do more with entrepreneurs, create the incentives, whether it's push or pull. I love the creativity of the policy incentives through the pension funds that Lisa mentioned. So as we bring this to a close, I hate to do this, but I think I owe it to our panelists. To give them the final word. As you can tell, I love to have the final word on any conversation. But Academia 2063 is not just a research institution. We're a think tank. And so we convene the brightest minds to think through the ideas, the innovations that will transform agriculture and bring prosperity across the continent. And so as we wrap this up, in no particular order, I'm just going to pick you as I see you on the screen. Paul, Lade, Chris, and then Lisa. Could you give us your closing remarks on the viability of agrivoltaics and how you see, what's getting you excited about the prospects, and then perhaps what you feel we need to pay more attention to if indeed this is to scale across the continent. Over to you.
Thanks for this, Debisi. So, it is a competitive space. There are other themes out there. I think the development impact needs to be clearly defined. The size of the potential of the sector will encourage the investors to come in. It is a more competitive pace for mobilizing, but I believe honestly that this sector, because of the KPIs that it can deliver in terms of jobs, technology, and climate and sustainability, that it will be a very important sector going forward. And these are thinking a bit about the jobs and sectors of the future, the markets that we need to develop. This combines those key markets. So in order to grow to a market, you need to have equity, and then to scale, you need debt. What type of debt? You will need to go from sort of, and we know that there's a lot of debt worries, at least at the sovereign, but also at the corporate level in many countries. So we need to sort of address that and show that also the productivity, the benefits to Africa's economy that we will see from our agrivoltaics will mitigate that. So I'm firmly interested, and I very much look forward to this agenda being delivered at the OECD and for this to be taken forward. So again, I've learned a lot through the discussions today. So thanks. Back to you, Debesi.
Super. Thanks, Paul. Lade?
Thanks, ABC. So I wanted to maybe suggest that as we think about developing this asset class, not to just look at the traditional sources of capital. I always like to throw out this stat. There's 400 trillion with a T dollars sitting in the global capital markets, the financial markets. And that, if you were to get a 1 to 2% allocation of that, it would easily, finance agrivoltaics, the SDGs, and pretty much everything we're trying to achieve from a sustainable development standpoint. But the challenge has always been, as I stated in my opening, how do you structure transactions to appeal to that type of investor? So that is something that I would also like to throw out here. For blended finance to work with agrivoltaics, I think the core concept is to think about how you leverage concessional capital to absorb the risks that private investors simply are not willing or fit to absorb, or that they can't price, while building that commercial track record. I also think that you should be thinking about this from the perspective of, over time, as investors become comfortable with this asset class, as they understand it, the level of concessionality should naturally decline over time. You're not going to need, guarantees. You're not going to need first loss layers, and so on. So again, there might be a high level of concessionality to begin with, but then the goal should be over a period of time, when you look at the life cycle, that you are seeing a downward trend with regards to the volume and the types of concessional capital that are being utilized. And then to my earlier point, I also think that, agriculture is more difficult to commercialize. There's a reason why, I think the last statistic I had was only 18% of blended finance goes to agriculture, whereas, upwards of 30% goes to energy, because energy is more commercially viable. So as you're starting out with this, I think the focus will be on de-risking the agriculture side, because energy is, solar power is quite well understood. And over time, the cost has declined and it's a more mature market. So again, the de-risking really shouldn't be trying to do two things. It should focus on where the greatest risk lies. And we should also try to bring in domestic institutional capital. A lot of times we focus on, attracting foreign investors. And, the challenge with that is it's hard currency. We know a lot of currencies in the region are volatile, and that creates FX risk. And, hedging is quite expensive. And this is one of the reasons why some transactions end up not being commercially viable. So there is domestic capital, there's domestic institutional investors. So again, they should be part of the conversation, I think, early on. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Ladi. Lisa?
Yes, I think, the arguments are there. The experts have spoken. How do we actually get to the deals? How do we get to the transactions? It is often, I think, as Chris said before we logged on, one battle at a time. So I think, having a coalition of partners, of advocates, of connectors is really critical, because it does come down to who can make the case across all these stakeholders to really get to the funding being released and eventually reaching where it needs to really to make that impact. So we're really excited to be the UN maybe piece of the puzzle in this very wide ecosystem, and hope that we can continue to be relevant, helpful, and part of the success. So really delighted to be here. Thank you for including us, and hope to stay connected with everyone here.
You're too kind. Thank you very much, Lisa. Chris, final word.
Well, thank you, everybody, not only for the speakers and our wonderful moderator and friend, Debisi, but all those folks online. And we'll do the recording, we'll send it out. But I see a lot of friends here today. Jochen, your question is good. I think what we should probably try to do is take note of the questions that were not answered and try to come back and be respectful of that. This is an hour. It flew by. You're right, Debisi. It's the tip of the iceberg. We will have another bite at the apple on the 10th of April. I hope, there is a hybrid opportunity. So please look at the C4SA website and find the login. Agri-PV, I've been working on food security for a long time. Food security is a complex issue with many different entry points, and it could be nutrition, it could be access, could be availability, it could be utilization, but it's what really has turned me into an evangelist for Agri-PV is the rich and copious numbers of those KPIs, those things that you can see right from the start with not a complex technology. I'm not a big fan of high tech, because it's high tech will make rich farmers richer if they can afford satellite technology and drones and super expensive equipment. That's not Africa. But what we're seeing, and look around us, look at the conflicts, look at what's happening in the Hormuz Strait. 20% of the world's fertilizer and oil, natural gas is stuck. Prices are going up through the roof. Who is suffering? It's the poor farmers in the global South. Why would you not want to promote food sovereignty, energy sovereignty, and put money into long-term investments that will pay huge dividends for your people. That is the thing that really makes me see agrivoltaics as a transformational solution. So I think if we can get the African diaspora as well to start looking at putting some capital into investments at reasonable ROI. If we can get the DFIs to the table, like Lisa described, the potential, I think if we get the ball rolling, things are going to move very quickly. And I think everybody I spoke to in Amsterdam yesterday was really excited about the idea, the concept. They understand this nexus approach is really the future. And we hope we can count on you to support that approach as well. We'll see you April 10. Please get your governments to participate. The platform will open for membership. We will let it close later in the year. In the meantime, we'll look to describe how specifically it works and what the experts from the science and research side will bring, what the business and farmers will bring, what the bankers and the financiers will bring. But this is the start of something we hope will be big and important. So thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. And again, for our participants who have put questions in the Q&A, those questions will be responded to, and we will get the responses to you. Our panelists, we will share the questions with the panelists, and we will send you the responses. So if my colleagues who are monitoring this platform can please take note of the questions in the Q&A function. As I bring this to a close, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to have facilitated this conversation. My sincere thanks to Chris Hegedon, Lisa Kubiel, Lade Araba, and Paul Horrocks for your insights, for your contributions to the conversation. As we wrap up, I would like you to pay attention to the resources that have been pasted in the chat from various organizations, C4SA, the OECD, the Joint SDG Fund, and of course, Academia 2063. We have quite a plethora, wide and rich library of resources for you to tap into. So we encourage you to engage with these resources depending on your interest, whether you're an entrepreneur, working in public policy, working in research, there's something for you. And we look forward to your engagement on April the 10th. So thank you very much. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Great to meet all of you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Stay well.
Thanks again,
Bye.
Academia 2063. Thanks to BC.
Okay.
Thank you, panelists.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks,
Okay.
Lai.